and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If I could get a motion for approval of the regular agenda.
So moved. Second.
Rick made the motion, got a second from
Sean.
Sean. I know. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Motion carried. Consent agenda. Anyone have any questions about the consent agenda? If not, I would take a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I just have a quick request for an update in the dog park. I'm pleased to see that's progressing, but is that, the two phase, just a clarification on the phases.
Yes, we're planning to get the first phase of the dog park done this year. That was budgeted money that the park board had for 2024. So we'll be putting in the fence, the gravel parking lot. Utilities already put in water line and hydrant, and that will pretty much conclude phase one. If any other future phases are done, that was what the dog park group would plan to fundraise for, and that could include, you know, sun shelter, additional, actually the utilities adding lighting too, and they donated that, but beyond that, everything else, you know, benches or other amenities will be fundraised for and provided by that group that has been doing that.
So those items in phase two, those fundraising things, are any of those planned for this year or not?
Not that I'm aware of at this point, no.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Then I will look for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Okay, small area plan update.
All right, we have Mike Lamb here tonight to provide an update to the council for the small area plan work that has been done to date. And Mitch, if you can bring that up.
Good, thank you. Good evening, members of the council. I'm Mike Lamb, part of the MSA consulting team that's looking at this small area, and I'll emphasize small area because it's not just the city side. It kind of includes a boundary from 4th Avenue Northwest up to Second Street Northwest, and then all the way down to the mill property and over to First Ave Northwest. So it encompasses a number of properties. Obviously, a lot of folks have been working diligently and successfully with raising funds for the POPs outdoor stage, and that's part of the process of this small area plan. It is also I don't know if I'll say amendment, but it's part of the comprehensive plan update that you're going through as well. So we found it was a good timing to go ahead and just dive into this. So let's go to the next slide. So we'll just talk a little bit about land development scenarios and next steps, and it'll just be a brief agenda. Have you got the May? Is this the May 6th one?
Should be.
All right, see what the next one looks like. Nope. What's the next one, Ken?
Oh, yeah, but it says April 10th.
Oh, you got April 10th. Sorry. That's a little bit of a preview. We'll go a little deeper
Here,
than that.
let's try that again.
Okay, it's the May 6th one.
Did I grab the one that says May 6th?
Anyway, as Ken's loading that up, we kicked this off at the very last day of January with staff. So we got into working on the small area plan in February, March, and April. I'll give you some updates to that. Our stakeholder group, which is really the stakeholder group that's overseeing the comprehensive plan update, also has been spending some extra time with us on this as well. So, so we've made some great progress. We started with 5 scenarios.
Bad news, I think that's the only one on here.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Here, I'll show you.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
That's the one I'm opening.
It says May 6th, huh?
Yep.
Oh, well.
Are these out of order again, or what?
Oh, I'm not sure what's in
So I
here.
apologize for that. I'll just go ahead and give you an update as to where we are, and then if you do have any questions, we can go from there. I do want to stop right here and just remind everybody in the room and the council tonight that there is an open house to look at alternatives this Wednesday, May the 8th, in the Braz, right?
Yes.
At the Braz location from 5 to 7. So it's an open house. We'll look at alternatives for development of the site, as well as get some community feedback about that. So just briefly, in February, we looked at 5 different scenarios, the stakeholder group did. We refined those down to 3 in March, and then we've refined them down to 2 different scenarios this past month that we'll share and show with the public on Wednesday. We're focused on a couple of things. The north side of the property, we're looking at residential development.
Mike, I
That,
can bring up the 2 drawings that were in the packet.
yeah, that'd be good. That's
Bring
what we
those
can
up.
talk, I can talk from
Mike,
there.
you're it, Mitch.
Thank you for doing that. Sorry about that, snafu. So we're looking at 2, and you got this in your packet. We have 2, down to 2 refined scenarios. One of them just has a general name called Civic Commons, and as you're looking at, if you're looking at it on your screen now, there's some townhouse, attached single-family townhouse development to the north on 2nd Street Northwest. Obviously, part of this development process and small area plan includes a strategic stormwater pond that we're trying to think of as just more than a pond, if we can, and that'll take up the western part of this site. In this particular scenario, a couple of things to notice. One, we're including a little area that could be a small sculpture park. We're also including, at the request of the stakeholder group, a small community room that could handle a meeting of, say, 50 or 60 folks. So that's something to consider as well as we go through this. And then, obviously, the performance stage there, kind of in the middle of that site plan, is number 5. And then, again, we're looking at some public parking organized along the southern part of the site off of the existing alley, and then also being able to accommodate some on-street parking as well in different locations. Let's look at the next scenario. This is the one we're called in-town living. It's a more multifamily idea north on 2nd Street Northwest. You can see that's called out here. There is a combined outdoor stage and community room. So that building would be one building that would allow some storage, public restrooms, those kinds of things to accommodate what's going on with the outdoor stage. There's also some senior cottages on the parcel just across the street where your community garden is today as an option for looking at that. We're also showing potential infill sites on the old mill site and on the Main Street side of the area that's along, just west of the bowling alley itself. Some of this, some of this development does reflect a variety of different land uses. I think we included a development program in the handout as well. Some of these are being considered. They may not all actually end up in the official master plan or small area plan. A couple things will happen as we go forward. One, we'll get some public input on Wednesday. We'll meet, hopefully, we anticipate meeting with our stakeholder group again in May, before the end of May. And the focus there will be to refine into a preferred development plan and small area plan. And then we'll bring that back to you at some point after that to get your feedback and your expectations about the plan itself. Part of the scope will also look at stormwater pond amenity, as well as some costs associated with having to do that from a grading standpoint. We hope to wrap that up. We're in we proposed a 4-month process. We're pushing into the 4th month now. We might go one more month. We're hoping to get this wrapped up as soon as possible because I know the community is ready to move forward with some next steps as well. So with that, I'll stop, and maybe, hopefully that went faster than without slides.
Yep. So this is kind of a, if something were like this were to come to fruition, it's kind of a phased approach, obviously.
Yeah, as far as the small area plan goes, this plan will update and support the overall land use guidance, the policy guidance in the comprehensive plan.
Yep.
But then there'll also be discrete components like the pop stage and the stormwater pond. Those are probably at the highest level of next steps for the site itself. But, you know, we've got some good indications of other interest in the site as well, so we'll have to see.
Thank you.
I have a few questions. The originally, the stormwater, I guess conceptually has always been looking at east and west. I'm just curious as to why it's now kind of north and south. Was there structural or city service issues that, or the conceptual, why is it conceived the way it is there?
It's just conceived that way mainly to organize the land uses on the site itself. Could it sort of meander back to the south side of the site? Absolutely. There's no rhyme or reason for that to not happen. We obviously wanted to kind of, at this point, it's sort of oversized. We don't really have a specific size for it or a capacity of it at this point. So we'll get into that in our next step. But, you know, that's a good comment. If you think there's some overarching issues or recommendations that would be a better site, then, you know, certainly we can take that into consideration.
No, I'm just curious if the committee or you felt there were some overriding issues that it really needs to be this way. I was just wondering because historically the pond was the other way. But.
And we looked at 2 or 3 conceptual ponds that you had looked at in the past, different engineering studies. Some were larger, some were smaller, some were in the middle, some were in different locations. One of the things the stakeholder group is focused on, and we've tried to respond to, is the notion of how this site can be seen and connect to Main Street, and how that reinforces what's going on Main Street. So we're sort of shading our uses back towards the east side of this site for visibility and access standpoint, but again, it's not set in stone, obviously, at this point.
The community room, that wasn't part of the original request from the council, I don't believe, but is that is just a concept as well, or is that meant to be a standalone, fully servicing building?
It is meant to be a standalone, I believe, a community building that you could schedule in town. And so that was the thought. It was a discussion the stakeholder group brought up, and we said, okay, that's another use. Let's at least put it in the process and see how it works out. So one of the, and this may or may not make sense from a feasibility standpoint, but the idea of combining it with the outdoor shelter canopy, I mean, maybe that's a win-win, but, you know, again, we haven't gotten to those details yet.
Yeah, I'm just trying to look ahead. It may be a win-win, but I can also see the challenge in it too.
Yep.
Trying to throw something at a project and either slowing it down or figure out where the money comes from for
Correct.
it. And that might be it. But is there anything that you found or the committee found out about as far as the city services or the unique or challenging or with stormwater or
obviously
with this or?
Yeah, obviously the dynamic part of that site that when we do get certain events, it does flood. So the notion of being able to anticipate those floods and then accommodate how that pond could not only act as a detention facility, but maybe a retention facility as well. So we're not quite sure about what that exact personality will be. But otherwise, you know, there's great access. We again want to emphasize visibility to Main Street. There's plenty of space on street for parking or overflow parking. We're going to look at other areas. We have looked at some potential overflow parking areas as well, but you know, we're trying to get a number of different land uses onto this site, and you know, all that's going to have to be that recipe of the stormwater and parking and the outdoor stage and all those kinds of things you know, it's fluid at this point. to
Do
say.
you or the committee feel like there's any particular restrictions on the fact that quite likely the POPs will be the first improvement to the site and nothing else may be done for a while? Is that limit its uses? Or does that kind of take some away from one of these concepts, or?
You know, I think it's a large site, number one, so obviously it will develop over time incrementally as, as investment and as investors are interested. We understand there's some general interest in housing, and so how do we kind of tee the site up for that? We know there's some soil corrections, or at least some soil issues with parts of the site that may restrict certain types or sizes of foundations. But at the same time, we've heard favorable conditions for developers who may want to develop some residential here. So if we can get a definitive sort of direction going forward, maybe the shelter is first, but I think that's going to build on, you know, interest, and I think it'll help build support for the other parts of the site itself. And obviously, there's going to be, if there is a residential development, there's got to be a platting process, because this is all one site right now that the city owns, so we'll have to look at that as well.
Thank you.
Who are the stakeholders?
The stakeholder group, mayor's on that group.
Yep.
You know
Yeah,
them
Tony
better than I
Boothie
do.
from the school district, Shalina Sperry from the chamber with Brooke Stika as the alternate. Brandon Pike from Planning Commission, Joe Barton from Park Board, and I think I might be missing one other one. Brent Quast from EDA.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were they all part of
They
the,
were part of the comp plan steering committee.
okay, so they were elected out of that body or essentially volunteered out of that body?
Yeah, I think that when we had come to the council, it was like, should we pick a new committee? And you said, why don't we just stick with the same group that had been working on the comp plan? So that's who we've continued on with. So
Okay.
they had been meeting for the past year on the regular comp plan update and have just jumped right into this process.
What's the city's commitment for this? I mean, when does a private developer come in and lay out the plans for, I mean, are we, obviously we have a fundraiser for the amphitheater. The pickleball courts, I'm assuming will be park board, or that'll be city?
We haven't even determined that much, Sean. So
Okay.
obviously you've got the pond, that would obviously.
That would be ours, right?
The
Right.
city, we're actually looking, and Chris Knutson's here, and,
The
looking for
trails.
funding opportunities for that. Yeah, obviously trail opportunities, and then some public parking probably would be from a city standpoint of our input. Beyond that, no, I don't think there's any expectation that we would, do anything more than that, other than, like Mike said, make land available. Maybe you do sell it, the north end for a residential development.
I
Again,
would
we
hope
haven't-
that we'd sell it, right? I mean, we
Yeah,
wouldn't just
we
give
haven't
it
even
to,
talked those details, but yeah, trying to set the stage for these different things to happen. And this is just a pretty picture of basically land use categories.
And I would anticipate, thinking about maybe the northern 200 feet of that block as going into some sort of a private development. And, so at the most 200, but probably somewhere around that 150, 200-foot depth.
have we approached any local developers on maybe some ideas what they could see, whether it's multifamily or single family or?
We have not, although I did get a call late last week from Scott County CDA, who obviously helped, or I should say, did develop the Phillips Square apartment building in the past. They're actually gonna come to the open house and
good.
chat with us on Wednesday. So they're interested. They've always kind of been interested in more 55-plus type housing. But I'm sure, yeah, if we would put this out to a request for proposals or something, I'm sure we'd have a lot of interest in different housing proposals for that.
Do you envision that as market rate apartments, or they would be subsidized, or?
No, haven't had any discussion on.
Well, no, I guess the point I'm trying to get at is with some of that green space, it'd be nice if the city wouldn't be all on a hook, that we could get a developer that could see that I can produce this level of housing or get this kind of money for housing if I put some of this green space in and work with the city, and
Yeah.
just as an amenity to the,
Yeah, that'd be
people
part of
that
the negotiation, and obviously, we've talked with apartment buildings. Obviously there's green space that, depending on the type of if there's families there, you know, there might be more of a need for that than a 55 plus. You'd still like some, but you know, it's a different mix at
Sure.
that point, so.
Yeah, I'm just curious, cause I mean, I like the proposal and, you know,
And what's the chance of the HUD stepping in or the state stepping in and saying exactly what we can do with them apartments if they were built?
No.
Nope, it would be,
I mean, it'd be no different than any other apartment in town. Like, I don't see the state just coming in and saying, no, you have to do this with these apartments.
if it's 55, is it a 2-story, 4-story? I mean, in your mind, I know there's a lot of what ifs involved
I
in this whole
think
thing.
that,
but
and Mike,
I'm just
you can
kinda-
probably address that conceptually, what you would envision and.
Yeah, cause of the the site does slope up to Second from the south to the north. So it really sort of sets up some nice tuck under townhouse kind of a product. Or you could, I think you could put like, say, a 3-story apartment building that ends up being 2 stories on Second, and the 3rd story kind of works its way back. Again, sort of a walkout condition. Because across the street, it's just single family detached, and there's a scale there. I think you want to be sensitive to that. But I think either one of those things could work, and, you know, there's lots of opportunities here in, this site for a lot of different things.
I guess, because if I was across Second Street there and one of those homeowners, I wouldn't want something totally obscuring my
Right,
view.
right.
But, okay, that answers.
That's what we hope to hear. I mean, we mailed notices direct to all the property owners adjacent. We obviously put it in the New Prague Times, Times Extra, and social media. So hopefully we get a good turnout on Wednesday and flesh it out a little more.
Okay. Thank you.
I guess I had a follow-up. I don't see a pickleball court drawn into the diagram.
Is
got
that
it.
number 6?
You gotta squint to see that one a little bit. Well, we've thrown this sort of list of uses out, and that's obviously a popular thing these days, whether it really gets, you know, you probably can't see any sculptures in the drawing either.
Right,
But
right.
the idea that we could reserve, dedicate, allow for some of those kinds of things. And again, back to Councilmember Ryan's comments about, you know, there's funding here, how much is the city gonna have to put into this? And so we have to balance all those things for sure.
Any additional questions, comments? No? And this is just an informational, so no action is required this evening, correct?
Correct. Hopefully we'll see you in a few weeks and have a more technically robust presentation. I apologize for
No,
that.
it's okay. It's okay. Thank
luck
you
on-
so much for your
Thank you
time
very
this
much.
evening. Appreciate it.
Is this Wednesday, correct?
This Wednesday, May 8th, across, down the street, and
Yep.
hope to see everybody there. Oh, yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. Okay. And the public is invited to be heard on matters not on the agenda. Do we have anyone online at all? No? All right, then will say that there's nothing to be discussed there. City engineer project update. Hi, Chris.
Hello, everybody. So with the project update, I do have updates on the 23, 24, 25 projects plus Main Street. So unless one thing I could probably add for the 2023 project, last year's project, it looks like paving is now scheduled for a week from Wednesday. Found out about half an hour ago or so, 45 minutes ago. So that's probably the most recent thing to add to that project. So unless there are questions on the Main Street 23 or 24 projects, I'm going to move into the 2025 item on here. So with that, I have in front of you today a proposal for the 2025 Street Utility Improvement Project to provide a feasibility report. This would be on the basically the same neighborhood we've kind of been plugging away at the last few years, but finishing the last section. So Lincoln Avenue North, Main Street to 4th Street, Pershing Avenue from Main Street to 5th Street Northeast, 1st Street Northeast from Columbus to Pershing Avenue. Those are all full reconstruction locations. One thing that's a little different here is that last block of Pershing between 4th and 5th was not originally identified for 2025 improvements, but it was during a later review identified as need to be completed. So the previous CIP did not have that block in there. 2nd Street Northeast from Columbus to Lyndale Avenue for consideration of mill and overlay and sidewalk improvements. And then also some alley improvements just east of Columbus, north of Main Street, by the utility building over there. So that's kind of those are the project areas. The report itself will be following the 429 process as far as public hearings and all that stuff we've kind of gone through each of the last few years. So you should be kind of somewhat familiar with how that all works out. What I do have for you is a proposal for starting that work a little bit earlier than previous years, just trying to get things moving ahead so we don't have public hearings the same night for 2 different projects in the fall like last year. So I don't want to do that again. Getting that early start to it allows us to spend a little more time on the design, assuming that the project proceeds further. So I do have a proposal in front of you today in the amount of $68,800. And that is for the preliminary engineering feasibility study and then also the topographic survey. So it takes us to the point where we've identified all the costs for the project, identified the funding, gone through a neighborhood meeting, public hearing, and you'd be ready to authorize the project, assuming you decide to do so in September. And then I do have the full schedule also outlined in my my proposal if there are any questions on that.
Can you just touch on the alley improvements a little bit, the pavement and drainage? Is there a drainage problem right there, or?
Yeah, it's a couple things, and something Matt and I talked about just a week ago here, actually. So the pavement in that area is in pretty rough shape. There's storm sewer that goes through there. Not everything's draining towards the storm sewer, but mostly it's a pavement type of improvement. So it wouldn't be fully reconstructing everything. It'd be trying to just improve the alley pavement around the utility building, and then everything from Columbus going 1 block to the east. So just a pavement type of improvement. It would not be assessed unless the council decides to do so. But
There's just one private house, isn't there, on where that alleyway is?
There's a few there.
Is there a few?
It's north and
yeah,
south?
it's
Oh,
a,
yeah,
it's a
there would be
T
south,
alley
yeah,
actually,
no.
so it does go extend north up to First Street as
there's
well.
about five properties, I would guess.
Yeah, and then also the utility building being the main building in that back area. But there is storm sewer that goes through the alley. The alley is up a little bit higher in some of the properties in the south end too. So by completing the alley improvements, the surfacing improvements, we could kind of help control drainage and get that into the storm sewer and help limit how much that drainage might actually make it into those private properties that are lower.
But those, the houses themselves wouldn't necessarily be assessed anything additional over the, or?
And we haven't really done much for alley work, I guess, so I don't know if there's been consideration for assessments on alley improvements. And that'd be something that council would have to decide if you decide to go that route.
I can't think of any that we've done in the past, but.
Well, this is a unique, I don't know too many alleys that are paved.
Right.
Is that because we have our building there, is it paved? Is that is that the reason?
It is a commercial area, so it gets a little more traffic because of that reason. Most alleys are gravel. There are some that are paved mostly in the downtown area, I guess.
All of our commercial alleys are paved, behind City Club, behind the post office. All those have been paved over the last 15 years. So this one was done probably longer than I've been here, probably almost 25 to 30 years ago. We've had to patch it quite a bit in the last 10 years. And working with Bruce, because he would like to repave around the warehouse too, on the utility side, the city would just be responsible for the alley part of it.
Okay.
So it is pretty common that all of the business alleys are paved.
Has the precedent been set that we assess those businesses for that alleyway, or?
I'm 90% sure we have not, but I would
Okay.
definitely need to look into it before I tell you 100% that we did not assess them.
Okay.
Unless Ken, you know offhand right away. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we can look into that for sure.
Yeah, we could, just to make sure.
Yep.
Thank you. That was the only question I had, Chris.
And if you do decide to proceed with this proposal, I do also have a resolution with you today to order the preparation of the report.
Any other questions for Chris?
What staff's recommendation is to proceed or not?
Yes, staff's recommendation is to proceed.
I'll go ahead and make a motion then to, approve the feasibility study and topographic survey, for a total of $68,800. I guess it'd be resolution 24-05-06-01.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second to approve Resolution 25050601, the 2025 Street and Utility Improvement Project ordering preparation of report on improvement. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay. So the next item on the agenda is an ordinance for introduction of the New Prague City Code, repealing Chapter 152 and replacing it.
Yes, so I'll provide a brief background and summary from the Planning Commission discussions that we had beginning back in February of '24. And then once again, the Planning Commission had a review back on May 1st, actually, so just last week. As the council might recall, we've been waiting for the FEMA flood maps to be updated from the LeSueur County portion of the city, which, or I should say the LeSueur County maps include all of the city of New Prague. A few years back, Scott County's maps had been updated. They did not include New Prague city limits in hopes that we would be included with LeSueur County. That is what indeed did happen, and our new maps will become effective on July 17th. Before we can get to that July 17th date, we were notified by actually the DNR and FEMA that we had to take a look at our floodplain ordinance and provide an updated version to them, showing that we're in compliance with the new map program that they're rolling out, again, effective July 17th. In speaking with the DNR, they're really the local agency, or I should say the state agency, helping us get compliant to have these maps go into effect on the 17th of July. And they indicated that due to our basic lack of ever granting a variance for allowing structures to be built in the floodplain, that they suggested that we go with what they're calling a simplified version of the floodplain ordinance. And that was kind of a new model ordinance that they're sharing with cities like New Prague, where we have not a ton of existing development and certainly don't plan to have new development within the floodplain. So in a nutshell, what the new ordinance would provide for is simply not allowing new structure development within the floodplain as indicated on the new FEMA maps. The old ordinance and their typical ordinance model, which I did include in the package just so you could take a look at it, is much lengthier and has processes for variances to allow construction in the floodplain. I do not believe we even have a structure in the floodplain. At this point, that's an occupied building. We have some sheds and other things, but for that reason, that's why the DNR suggested we go this route. Planning Commission concurred in their review. Again, with the most recent public hearing on May 1st, we did not have any public input either at that time. So that is really as simple as I can make it, that the new ordinance just simply doesn't allow any construction within the floodplain. And if you look at the maps in the packet, where our floodplain is largely along Phillips Creek, which comes through town from basically Southside Park, kind of north along Trunk Highway 21, through Phillips Park, and then ultimately up by the Living Lab at the Falcon Ridge Elementary School, and then back out of town. That's really our largest floodplain area. And then there's a smaller floodplain area up by Wenzel Avenue northeast, kind of where the Greenway Trail and that area comes through town. So again, not a ton of floodplain areas, and that's really why we're recommending the simplified version that simply doesn't allow new buildings to be constructed within the floodplain. So if you have any questions, I can stand for those. Otherwise, we are looking simply for an introduction and first reading here at the meeting tonight.
In looking at the replacement for Chapter 152,
Yeah.
there are some duties for record keeping in perpetuity. Is that something that the city is able to manage?
Yeah, so with our permit system, old systems and even our new one, we have digital address files and we're able to keep on record every FEMA and or building permit into perpetuity going forward. So no issue with that.
So in particular, it's, one of the items is final elevations as applicable, detailing the elevation to which structures and improvements to structures are constructed. Is that something that we generally also maintain?
Typically, if we have a new home constructed, we do require as-built, showing, you know, low floor elevation, grading, and all the pertinent elevation points. So that would be for basically homes constructed from about 2008 on forward. Some of the older projects where we would have that information would be if they were issued a letter of map revision or map amendment to FEMA to basically verify that they were built out of the floodplain. Not to get off track too far here, but the old FEMA maps weren't very accurate. So a lot of homes looked like they were in the floodplain, but they were actually elevated out of, you know, what would actually be the floodplain. But on the map, they like just had a straight line that just kind of jogged, you know, and looked like it went into a neighborhood, but it really didn't. In those cases, we have those on record going back, you know, a number of years. So,
Okay.
yeah. So in those cases, we would. Some homes that weren't anywhere near floodplain, we may not have that information, but in that case, it's really not pertinent at that point
Right.
to FEMA.
Okay.
So.
Okay, thanks. That was the only question that I have.
What's the standard that they use? Is it a 100-year floodplain, a 500-year? Or?
There's 100-year and 500-year.
Oh, there's two different ones?
Yeah,
Oh.
they're kind of more focusing at this point. If you look at the maps in the packet, there was kind of a line, maps with diagonal lines on it. That's floodway where you have travel of water and you're pretty much guaranteed you're gonna have building damage if your building's within the floodway. And then you have the floodplain, which is simply where the water rises up to a level where you're gonna have flooding. Probably not gonna wash a structure away, but you're definitely gonna have that in that area. And they're just calling those floodplain now. They're not as specific. Before it used to be 100-year floodplain and then 500-year floodplain or unshaded, meaning it didn't have a designated flood elevation. They've kind of just lumped those more together in the new maps.
Okay.
And quite honestly, we have not had our full training on it yet. We're doing that with Stewart County at the end of May here. So I'll have more of those details, but it's really, are you in the floodplain or not? And that's what the color-coded maps show you at this point. So a bit easier to read for us too.
Thanks, Ken.
So if there are any additional, no additional questions, I think then we need to make a motion to publish the ordinance for 10 days, the city website, and the City Hall Bulletin. And then at our next council meeting, we'll make a determination from there.
Yes, so this would be approving the first reading.
Yep.
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance 349, the first reading for the new floodplain standards.
And I'll make a second. We have a first and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Okay. Next is the awarding of the sale of general obligation bonds, Series 2024A, in the aggregate amount of $4,745,000.
So we have Doug Green from Baker Tilly joining us virtually tonight. Thanks, Doug, for hopping on. So he's just going to go through the process this morning of the bid process and who was awarded the sale.
Good evening.
Good evening. Again, Doug Green, Baker Tilly. Sorry I couldn't be there with you in person. I do have a few slides. Hopefully it will. I've never used GoToMeeting sharing, but we will see. Choose which app to share. Select to tab. We'll give this one shot, and if it doesn't work, then we will just talk through it. Let's see here. Are you seeing it now?
Yes.
Oh, you are. Look at that. Okay, great. So as Robbie mentioned, we took bids on behalf of the city at 10:30 this morning, had a very good sale, had 8 bids, which is just a great showing. $4 million in the market's not that big, but There's, had a lot show up. So we award the bids based off the true interest cost. That takes into account the pricing, the coupons, the yields, and the underwriter's discount, the fee that they pay themselves to purchase them and resell them. And for the fourth issue in a row, I don't think I've ever seen that before, Robert W. Baird was the winning underwriter at a true interest cost of 3.43%. See, it's pretty, given the volatility in the market, it's pretty tight from top to bottom, only 15.15%, 15 basis points from top to bottom. So we certainly got fair market bids. So how does this compare to previous sales? It's just
Doug, can you hear us? I think we lost you.
Mitch, did he get disconnected?
I don't have internet. You can see it down here. No internet.
Okay, well, we will internally talk real high level about this stuff then.
You pay the bills, right?
He's here, actually, let's try this.
I'm on. I still have it. You still have yours on, Bruce?
So what does that equate to in terms of annual debt service for the streets, net of assessment? $287,000 per year, water's 75, sanitary sewers 67,000, storms 40, and the equipment is financed over 5 years, around 42,000 per year.
Hey, Doug, I hate to interrupt you, but we lost you for probably 30 seconds, which seemed like eternity for us. But if there's anything that you needed to bridge between the comparison of past sales and where you picked up.
Yeah.
So
Okay. So the comparison past sales, you did hear that?
we heard you share that that was going to be the slide we were looking at.
Okay. So just the comparison past sales, we're right at, where we were last year. Despite volatility over the last year, we ended up right at the exact same spot. And again, Baird being the winning bidder, again, they really have they really like New Brake's paper. So that's, if you know anybody from Baird, thank them. So with the pricing, every bond, in this interest rate environment prices with a premium. That simply means that they offer more than 100% than asking price. So you see the maturities there from years 26 throughout to 40. We take that $362,000, put it in the construction fund, and reduce the par amount of the bonds. In exchange, we pay those higher coupons. So from a total debt service payments over the life of the bonds, it changes when those payments are made a little bit, but in the end, it's a wash. Are we still good?
We're still with you.
All right. So how does this work out to annual payments? You see there for the streets, it's net of assessments, 287, water around 75,000, sanitary sewer 67,000, storm 40,000, and the equipment was amortized over 5 years at 42,000 per year. Did go through the rating process again. The rating was affirmed at AA, which is great. You see, it's the third highest credit rating. And just a few excerpts from the report, which I saw the report is in the packet. Again, just strong management. You have your policies in place. You have your capital plan. Your budget comes in, where you expect it to. Growing economy. a little bit outside of major metro areas, so the income levels, which is typical for any community that's outside major metro area. So those income levels lag a little bit. Going back to the budget performance, very good across all the general fund and then those other governmental funds, capital funds, obviously debt service funds. The budget flexibility, that's your fund balance and liquidity here takes into account your cash across everything, governmental funds and the enterprise funds, very, very strong. And then the debt and contingent liabilities, high debt levels compared to national peers, but that's, that's common in Minnesota just simply because we have the ability to issue bonds without a referendum. But on a positive note, it's amortized rapidly, which they take into account. So all in all, a very good sale. And I was impressed to see that already planning for 25, which is impressive.
Does anyone have any questions for Doug?
Was that credit rating report gonna be in the packet or not? I was just going through there, but if not, could you just maybe email it to us?
Yes, I can. Yes.
Okay, unless I missed it.
I believe it is in there.
It's in the packet, it's under 11.3. It's the second attachment, Standard & Poor's bond rating and official statement.
Page 82 in the
the
email version.
I can email you separately too, Sean.
Okay. Would that have been the one that was on our desk tonight?
Nope, that's the updated resolution,
Okay.
from the original resolution to now that it has been sale day and we actually have a, true interest amount. The resolution gets updated, so. That's just the updated version with the terms and interest.
Great, thank you.
So if there are no other questions, can I have a motion to approve Resolution 24050602, awarding the sale of the General Obligation Fund Series 2024 in the aggregate amount of $4,345,000?
So moved.
Second.
I have a first and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I'll say aye. And any opposed? Motion carried. Quick question. I just want to double check the dollar amount because the resolution says $4,345,000, but our agenda says $4,745,000.
Correct. That's the premium that I talked about. So you go into the sale offering a certain amount, then you take bids, they offer the premium, and then we reduce it.
Okay, thank you.
Correct.
Thank you. So the
Thanks,
correct
Doug.
amount is the lower amount.
What's in the
Correct.
resolution?
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Okay,
Right.
so the resolution has passed.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time,
Thanks,
Doug.
Doug.
All right.
And next is a resolution approving the purchase of real property.
Yes, I will stand in for Ken. His son had a band concert tonight, so I told him to get out of here. Back on April 1st, we did have a closed session where City Council authorized staff to negotiate for the property over adjacent to what is now being called City Center for a piece of that. Using this direction, staff did work with City Attorney Scott Riggs and the seller to put together a purchase agreement, and this agreement before you tonight is $45,000 for that property. As you can see by the attached agreement, the seller does agree and has signed, and so the next step, I guess, would be for City Council to agree and sign as well. So I guess if there are any questions, I can certainly stand to answer them. Otherwise, that would be my recommendation, be approving resolution 24050603.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve Resolution 25040603 of approving the purchase of real property. We have a first and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Okay, discussion about the police station.
Yes, a couple meetings ago, John McNamara from Old Architects was here to discuss the schematic design that we had hired them to work on, which resulted in the attached work that I put in your packet. With this design, Wold was able to come closer to a potential final design, including exterior aesthetics, interior layout, and a closer estimate on what those costs would be. During this meeting, the council did ask to kind of look at the numbers again on future budgeting estimates. I've worked with Robin Pickles since that time to kind of put together a more robust future planning document that we'll hopefully be able to use as we go forward into a much larger future planning scale. But in your packet, I've included 4 different scenarios. Choosing these scenarios just because they kind of stood on the far ends of what we could do, trying to peg the very outsides, and working with documents that we have approved to this point. And so the first scenario that I have in your packet looks at kind of what the levy could look like, assuming that a police station is not included, kind of going forward, and looking at CIP, equipment, that sort of thing, as has currently been approved in its exact state. Some of that has changed a little bit already. I do mention in there working with Chief Rinda on potentially moving back a fire truck. And I know talking to Public Works Director Matt Rinda that he said the likelihood of all this equipment going exactly as it's planned now is quite low, but that is where the document currently stands, so that is what we had to work with. But looking at that first estimate for if we would levy for all the equipment in the year that it is currently standing, there are certainly swings that you would potentially see in levy changes, and that is just due to how equipment is currently sitting on there. 25 happens to be a year where a lot of equipment has fallen on the list. Like I said, that will likely change once we really dig into 25 budget season. 26 has a lot less, and then 27 jumps up again with both streets and fire. So you get a lot of volatility when you're levying year over year. You will notice in all of these that the equipment fund levy, kind of the current policy that we were working with was that would be debt service minus 1 million. So that equipment levy does kind of trail off to 0 by 26, just as we see that potential debt service increase as we kind of wrap up our total reconstruct projects here over the next couple years. Moving on to the second page, I've got levying for all equipment, but including the police station, just so those numbers are in there. That adding, as the number grows, your volatility naturally decreases, but you do still see, would see 25, 26 into 27 being those larger jumps, and then it would decrease or flatten out a little bit rolling into 28. One of the other things I looked at is we have in the past, I know the bonded for equipment. The last couple of years, the golf board has done a lot more, but looking back farther beyond that, we have done it historically in the past some years. The third page that I kind of included in those scenarios does lay out what the current CIP requests for equipment year in and year out, and then kind of worked out a bond schedule with levying amounts year to year. So moving on to the other 2 scenarios that include police station, with and without the police station, you do see that the overall change year to year does level out a lot, because you're taking really 25 and 27 and you're spreading them out over a 5-year period to pay for that equipment. So your increases year to year would be significantly less. Again, this is assuming all the equipment is purchased exactly where it currently stands. And then obviously with the police station, you would see the jump in the year of the police station. But again, that would levy out. So the fourth document, we've gone through a couple reiterations as net tax capacity's changed, as the potential amount of spending has changed. And so I do have the document from Baker Tilly that kind of lays out the projected levy impact were we to add the payments for a police station over 25 years. Working with Doug, he did say a 4% interest rate is still a pretty good estimate at this point. So using off of our current numbers, we'd be looking, a police station would be looking at an initial impact of about a 14% increase over the 2025 budget as was estimated here. And then I also have the what the potential residential market value, commercial and apartment increases would see in taxes. As you can see, a $250,000 house would see roughly an increase of $154 a year. A $400,000 house would see roughly $261 a year increase with a police station under the assumptions that have been made. So I guess I will stop real quickly for any questions. I'll say as we kind of get into this, one of the other things that you guys had asked about was a short summary, and that was included in there. It's about a 2-page, I believe, summary, kind of summarizing the whole facility study, as well as on the very bottom of that, adding in, there's questions about what the ambulance garage itself costs, and John's estimate was the overall impact of the garage stalls is about $500,000 to $560,000 as part of the total project to include those 2 garage stalls into the project. And so I guess the last attachment I've included is the next steps for the council in this process would be moving into the design phase and construction documents, and I've included Wold's proposal for that. Their numbers are still for their design fees. They're still basing off of their original budget of $10 million, not the current 12.3 where it stands. And backing out the fee for those, that next phase would be about $420,000, kind of the bulk area of their fees for design and construction. And I've included that letter from John explaining that purpose. And I guess I'll just say at this point, I believe it's vital that we try to keep this process moving forward. We started talking about this a little over 2 years ago, actually, and the numbers have continued to evolve. They've kind of come down from where the initial estimates were back when we started this process, up closer to 15, 16 million. And I know when I was hired, there seemed to be an understanding that something needs to happen. And so I do think it's vital that we keep having these conversations and trying to move this process forward in some way. So I can certainly stand to answer any questions for what we're looking at now. I'll say all of these estimations I have are complete scenarios, and I'm making a lot of assumptions. And so my hope is that these assumptions are conservative. The one thing you will notice it's different, Bruce did ask, kind of concerning the debt service levies that we saw with the budget and how they compare with the debt service levies in here. Now that I've been able to parse together and think about the question. So the debt service levies that I've kind of put in front of you there was what we saw with the budget process. These, at the time of our approval of budget, were all the current debt service levies as they stand. I wasn't projecting out any potentials because we didn't have numbers on them. And so the numbers in your packet here with debt service levy are me attempting to do a conservative estimate, hoping that I am high on what future projects will cost us, so that we can kind of get an idea of what may be in front of us for street projects.
I have a quick question. So why did the costs come down all of a sudden? Well, from our initial 12.3 to 10 million, as you were.
Oh, no, so the cost as it stands right now is 12.3 million, where what Wold is recommending through the schematic design process. The 10 million was kind of what they, if we take it all the way back to where we kind of first started talking about the process, I think 10 million is about where they landed, and so that is where they are basing their fees off of. Their when the project increased potentially in cost once they had their cost estimators look at it, they didn't say, okay, well, Cause I believe if you go back, they're collecting, their fee is 7% of the total project cost. And so since the initial cost projection was 10 million, they're not saying, well, now the project's costing 12.3 million, so we're gonna base our 7% off of that. They're keeping it based on that initial 10 million. Does that make sense?
Yes. What, I asked Scott Riggs this, our city attorney, and I can't recall what he said, but do we have the option of putting this up to a referendum?
My discussions with Scott were that we don't have that option. That is an option, the way he kind of recounts it, because he said many cities have asked this when he worked at the league, and since then, that basically the state has said that this is a power that has been given to the city councilors, and they would like them to exercise that power. That was kind of the gist of the conversation, because I've talked to him a few times about that as well, and
Right, so what is a proper use of a referendum? What is something that we could do if we were looking outside of a police station? Where you can, because I know they do it.
Yep. And I mean, I believe,
We had to do it for the library as an example.
Okay,
and I wonder if it's more of a cultural thing, because I know that there are also, if we were to try to pay for something with the sales tax, I know if you throw out like the hockey arena or some sort of sports complex, the thought was, well, you'd hope that sometimes outside users would be paying into that or coming to use it, so maybe we fund it with a sales tax, and that would be one that would require a referendum of sorts. But I know for this particular thing, and I know even looking back at the fire station was another one where, I mean, it was bonded for by the city. A referendum was not done for that either.
right. I'm just curious on what, I mean, I remember Scott saying something like that, and I wholeheartedly agree that, you know, we're elected as representatives for the taxpayer, but, and I'm not afraid to make a decision. I guess I'd just like, because the overwhelming people that I talk to, and that's certainly by no means a good representation of the city, but, you know, they question it. And they see their levies going up every year, and it's not just 7% because it's based on your home's value, which is great when you sell it, but if you're not selling it, that money's coming out of your checkbook that year, right? So if your house goes up $50,000, which is great in the long term, because eventually you will sell it, but you're paying 7, 8, 9, 10%.
Yeah, I mean,
on the increase of that house too.
And that would, I mean, if everybody's went up $50,000, yeah.
I just used a rough number.
It's based relative off of everybody else's,
Right.
yes.
So, but we've had businesses come in here before, a few years back, when Scott County said, oh, well, we're raising our levy 8%, and, then they revalued all their businesses, which were substantial, so it was more like 17 or 18% is what these businesses had to come up with that next year. Yeah, great, if they're gonna sell the building and sell the business that year, they made 18% from the year before, but now they have to pay taxes out of their checkbook right now, and they can't raise their rates 18%. So that's my concern, and that's really part of the reason I'd like to get a gauge from the community on what is the community's thought process on this? We can do this $12 or $13 million program at the expense of a fire truck or at the expense of a pickleball courts or whatever. Somewhere the money's got to come out of somewhere, and I'm just curious if there is. I know what Scott said. I guess I'd like to get a more definitive answer than, well, the legislature has put it in the council's hand. But does that mean we can't do it?
Yes, from what I understand.
Okay, I'd like to hear that again from them if we could. And it doesn't have to be the next time, but, so to be honest with you, I don't know if I'm ready to make a decision myself to move on to the next round.
I'm not either. It'd be nice if, Scott was here, reason being, I agree with, Sean on this one point that I've gotten more people that have called me and talked to me about this than any issue ever in there that I've ever had.
And what kind of comments have you been hearing, Rick?
What's that?
What kind of comments have you been hearing?
Same thing what we heard from the one guy that was here, about not putting the police station right next to the firehouse. The other one is, are we gonna have more open meetings on this? And, then it was just opinions, so, but, the ones that got me that I would ask Scott, why can't we do it under a referendum, would be because of all the, do we have to put the building right there?
So the comments that you've been receiving is the location of the potential new police station?
Yep, for several different reasons. The one reason was because if you're gonna have a fortified police department and you're gonna connect it to a unfortified fire department, does it put the firemen at risk? And there was one more that caught my attention that made me wanna. It would be nice if Scott was here so that we could I could say for sure so that when I tell these people this, I don't get yelled at.
About the referendum?
Yep.
Well, I think if we could just get an email or a memo or something from Scott, would that satisfy what you need?
Yeah, as long as that, it's not up to me. I mean, I'm not an attorney, so.
So I will say, talking about, I know public safety centers like this are becoming more and more common, especially as we seem to be finding more and more cities are finding themselves in situations where they do need to lock down their public safety buildings for one reason or another. It allows for other city services to continue at that point. Right now, if we were to lock down the police station, we'd also have to lock down the rest of City Hall, basically. So I know that you're seeing more and more cities go the direction of a public safety center and separate from other services.
Right. The other one was a couple of paramedics asked me if, well, do we have to have the ambulance bays there? I mean, whether, maybe we don't want to lease them. You know, and my answer to them was, well, you're gonna be like a taxi driver hanging out in the parking lot somewhere waiting for calls. I don't know how you guys feel about that.
And I guess that's more of a conversation to have with North Memorial Ambulance Management, I guess, than paramedics. I don't know how.
Yeah, right.
I'm not saying that they're not in on those talks, but I know Dwayne and I have already broached the subject with North and have begun those potential conversations.
And they would go on leasing them?
I mean, that becomes the conversation of once this current lease is up.
Yeah, and also the final design process.
Yeah.
Right, so.
They are fully aware of the situation at this point.
And then my other question for you is, what were you saying about Steve? You talked to Steve about, and they're gonna offset some of the equipment purchases? Is that what you?
For 2025, there's currently a fire truck that is set on the CIP. The city portion of that currently being estimated at about $400,000. Talking to Steve, it sounds like he is fine potentially pushing that back a few years and taking it off of 2025. That's what I was saying. That's just one example where the currently approved CIP is already being shuffled around a little bit, where we aren't making purchases exactly where they currently stand because we don't need to yet.
All right, I just want to let you guys know that there was a couple people that did get a hold of me. I get actually stopped and talked to a couple more times, and almost like Sean does on that one.
Well, mine's based on, yeah, it's been many more than a few, but it's a financial concern. And I don't think I've heard anything that they didn't like the location, tying it in with the fire department. But there's a lot of people that want to weigh in on this, and I don't know if they feel like they've had a say in it. I don't know if I tell them to reach out to the other council members and to the mayor, and let them know. Whether or not they do, I don't know, but it's basically a financial issue. We just can't be everything to everybody at every time. We could always say that, you know, our fire truck's gonna go up $200,000 if we wait 3 years on it. So, I mean, that's that can't really be part of the issue.
But
It's-
if we wait on a police station, then that price tag is only gonna go up and up and
I
up.
agree, but same with the pickleball courts, and same with the ice, second sheet of ice, and the same thing with new lacrosse fields.
What's priority, right?
Right. So,
And the fact that our police space, office space right now is wholly inadequate.
I wouldn't say wholly inadequate. I would disagree with that. I say it's not convenient and it might be full.
We have evidence room problems. We don't have a proper training facility.
We have a training facility that they can use, that they're using currently through the county. The evidence, I have not heard of an issue where evidence has not been able to be used at trial, or that there's been some type of break in the chain of custody that's cost us a case or cost the county a case. It might not be as large as we want. We might not be able to store as many cars as we can, but I think we've been making do with other things. But again, I don't know if I'm ready to make a decision right now based on everything. I guess I'd like to hear what Scott's opinion is, whether that's an email or not, if we could do a referendum. I think people would like to weigh in on it, but maybe we even have a work session where we invite the public. I don't know what the answer would be.
Well, and the public are certainly entitled to come to the city council.
I agree.
It's not an item on the agenda, and then they can talk.
I think what we would need to do is we'd need to advertise for something, because they're not gonna pull up a regular agenda and then look at the very bottom and see under miscellaneous that we're gonna get an update on the police station. Then there's gonna be an ask for $400,000 in design fees, so, or whatever it was, I'm sorry.
No, that's all right, about 420.
Oh, 420, okay.
Well, it's certainly easier if we would have to have a referendum. The library was required to do a referendum. I can't recall exactly why it was. It was just the unique nature of us owning the building and it being serviced by Scott County. I don't recall what the requirement was. The last large payment when we bought the park building, we didn't need a referendum for that. And we didn't need a referendum for the swimming pool improvements. And there's a lot of consternation about the money being spent on that one, and people didn't have the opportunity to weigh in on that. Some dollars that the city put into that was involved in it. So this is not unique, and this is a pretty important issue.
But the $1 million though that the city put in, we pulled from other,
It didn't. Funding of the city.
yeah, but we had other, excuse me, we had other funds where monies was sitting there. It didn't mean in a direct
didn't ask the
result of
public.
the.
You
No,
didn't ask
no,
the
no, no.
public to vote on it.
Right, you're right, and I agree
Yeah,
with
there's
that.
no voting. There was no opportunity for the residents of New Prague to say, no, use that money for something else.
I think though that if there would have been a direct impact on their levy,
It did.
that might have been a consideration. Well, most of that money was pulled out of.
Right, but you
Yeah.
can't say that it didn't have an effect on the levy, because the money was gone, it was used. If it
Right,
wasn't
that had been
used,
sitting in several
it could have been
funds
used
for.
in other ways for the finance.
Right. And I'm, again, you're right, there isn't a precedent set for some of this stuff, but I just would like to know if we could do that. And if we could do that, I would like to see what the community's take was. We could have it on this
Right.
election this year in November, and it could say it might pass 75 to 25. And then that helps us know that, you know what, people understand that this is gonna affect their tax levy, and it's gonna cost them this, and, we get a better judge across a much larger.
Well, I hope that process is taking place now. We've spent a lot of time and are spending time in providing a lot of detail through our conversations, and Josh is another example of this here. So there's communication taking place throughout this whole process. And if someone doesn't know about it by now after 2 or 3 years, I don't get the comments that you've been receiving.
Well, they
But,
came from other people. I like the process, and I'm pretty sure you're gonna get that fire or police department just the way you wanted it. But I'm saying that I have been asked more about this in the last 2 weeks than any of the other projects that we've taken on.
Well, that's probably a good thing. I mean, it's an important project, so hopefully the community is asking questions about it, and so that's, to me, that's not a bad thing.
Well, and granted, it's an overwhelming no with the number of people that I've talked to. I don't think that's representative of the entire community. And I'll be the first one to admit that. That's why I'd like some more information to see where.
Well, my limited study of referendums, and I led the one for the library, so I think we passed that by 70 votes. And you can, right off the bat, 30 or 40% people are gonna vote no automatically because it's an increase in taxes. So you automatically have that hurdle. But I feel, what we're elected to be is to make these kind of decisions. And if we feel it's in the best interest of the city, which we have outside people telling us that, we have staff telling us that too. And my understanding of the information provided to us is it is an important thing that we should be doing. So,
We're a representative government, I mean, it's.
but I appreciate what Josh has presented to us. I had a number of questions I asked Josh about the financial details of it, and he was able to answer. I'm a little disappointed that it would have the effect it would have on our tax capacity, but I understand it. And there are some conservative estimates that hopefully it would be less than that, but I think the tax capacity estimates are fair, maybe conservative, maybe not. It's hard to say if we're gonna have a growth in the city in the next 10 years similar to what we had in the last 10 years. If we do, these numbers would actually be better. I think the debt service estimates are realistic estimates. I was trying to understand, once the major road projects are done, what's the impact of that $2 million overlay kind of part of it that actually has a greater impact on our levy than some of the road constructions that we're doing today for $4.3 million. So, but that's kind of an, could be a conservative estimate on that side of it too. So there may be reasons why these numbers might be higher. But I do feel strongly that we do need to kind of get off the pot and get going on this. It's not something, if you're totally against it, then we should have a vote and deal with it. But we understood that this police department was the major item we needed to deal with through our study. And if we're not going to address it here, or if we're going to push it to a referendum and have it go down, then what are we going to do? What are we going to do then? Where's the money going to come from if we have a referendum and it's turned down? Because then you're talking, what's it going to be like in the next 10, 15 years? Because we're not going to get the improvement done. So I wish that nothing would affect taxes. I wish our tax capacity would just keep growing great, that they wouldn't go up, but it doesn't, the world doesn't work that way. So I would encourage us to keep pushing on and carry it forward. I don't know that there's any other information that's going to be provided to us that's going to change. You can make your own estimates and make other judgments on it if you don't feel comfortable with it. But then we should take some action.
Well, if we took a vote right here, right now, today, it would still pass. But what I'm saying is, if these people are asking me this stuff, am I doing my due diligence? You got 2.5 probably from the government, hopefully, cross your fingers. You could take out like the weight room and move a couple walls around a little bit, and might take off another 500,000. I know they don't need a weight room when we got an aquatic center that needs their business. So there's still little changes we can make in the plans, but already you're talking 3 million off, and the price is probably a little bit lower. But if you wait just a year, that's all gonna double. So I would say let's call a vote next time on the whole thing. Let's get this, the plan. We could figure out what we could take off of that.
So Josh, are we looking that we need to make a motion to move on to the next phase?
So,
Or we'll-
I mean, that's kind of I guess I would recommend moving on to the next phase. Obviously, you have to be the ones to vote. I did include the contract from Wold Architects, if that is the way you wish to go tonight. If you wish for more information, I can certainly call Scott, and I'm sure I can get an opinion from him in the next couple days, but obviously we then back to May 20th to discuss and vote at that point, so.
Well, that's just it. Could we do something, a pending, that would make you feel comfortable with this?
I don't know if I would be comfortable with a pending recommendation. I would say,
I don't think 2 weeks is too much to ask, considering the mayor's not here. And we're awaiting an answer from our city attorney.
Well, you got the answer.
Right.
I don't think I did.
Well, Josh had the answer for you, but you wanted.
well, I mean.
No.
Sean, you too said though that Scott has told you that, but you want to hear it again.
I thought that that's what he said. I am not sure if he directly, if I misspoke, I misspoke. And that's fine. You guys can make a motion and go. I mean, you don't need me. I'm just saying, I'm telling you, I've heard an undercurrent that would like more information. I'd like to be able to address some of that. And I've been specifically asked by a former long-term council member, why can't we do it? Why can't we put it to a referendum?
I
So
think he just told you, so I don't know. Do you
there's
want me-
someone with a lot of experience within the city government. And I said it was a very good question. I don't know. I'll try to find that out. I was under the impression that we couldn't, but I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I said, I know that he quoted the fact that we're elected officials and we have the legislature would like us to do it this way, but that isn't a definitive no. You can't do it. Now, maybe he'll tell us that. I don't understand why we couldn't get an answer for that. And wait 2 weeks for another meeting. But
I'm comfortable in waiting if it means that much, and then the mayor would be present as well, probably, but.
Yes, he
but
plans
it's
on
a
being back
courtesy.
on Wednesday.
We may not have the votes to pass it tonight anyway, so.
You would have the votes to pass it right now. But what I'm saying is, are we doing our due diligence, and are we giving Sean a fair chance?
don't worry about me. I can vote the way I want, Rick. But I
I'll
mean,
call the
you
vote.
seem like you were a little apprehensive
I am
yourself.
very-
You're
very-
contradicting yourself. One minute you're saying I've.
Very,
heard this.
but I don't know how many more elections I have to go through, so
Well, what's the decision?
I'll move it.
You're making a motion to go to
I'll
the
make a
next
motion to
phase?
move it.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to move to the next phase. We have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
I'm opposed. I'd still like an answer from the city attorney though. on-
Yes, Sean, I was gonna tell you, yep, I will fire off an email and get that call set up with Scott, hopefully tomorrow.
And Sean, I'm sorry that I did seem so.
No,
conflicted
Rick,
about
hey,
it.
no. you
I'm
have every
really
right
on the
to
fence
vote.
with it myself, but,
That's how the system works.
and the money waiting is gonna just cost us.
So the next item on the agenda
just wanna-
is, oh, sorry.
Make a comment too. I think all these comments are very valid, and Sean, if you know people that have comments, I think, if you have a mystery city council alumni that has valid comments, bring them forward so we can get them answered during this process.
Yeah.
If there's other things that come up,
And
because
I certainly
don't
invite
wanna-
anyone in the public to fire off their comments so that we have as much information as possible on our side for this.
we're doing this in the spirit of goodwill, so if there's,
No,
should
I,
address these comments and concerns as we go through the process. So if anybody's talked to someone, I haven't heard the comments that you've been hearing, so.
I wish people felt more comfortable to attend
Coming in here
meetings
and
and to
talk.
come
Right.
here and be on TV and unfortunately, and even to reach out to you guys, I tell them, hey, I heard you.
I've gotten it.
Want you to reach out to the others too.
I think we should get these things to Josh and so we can cover them throughout the process.
Right.
And no one has approached me at all, so I haven't heard one way or the other. Okay. Thank you for the discussion. Last item on the agenda is the personnel handbook update.
So the attached memo kind of outlines that we've had some situations arise since my time here, since Josh's time here, which has warranted some discussion about if we should consider some type of leave donation or leave bank for employees that would be in need. So the goal of it is to support staff that have already exhausted their sick leave, vacation leave, and all paid leave options. So we did reach out to peer cities through a League of Minnesota Cities contact information. That was a year and a half ago, yeah. And we had 12 respond. It's kind of all over the place of folks of what they offer, but we did see that quite a few do offer some type of, I'll call it an employee support leave program. We spoke with Kennedy Graven about it. They actually didn't have hesitation giving us some support writing a policy that could fit for us as a city. So I'm just trying to pull up here the document. So the policy itself would be giving staff the opportunity to donate up to 40 hours per year of sick leave, which would sit in a bank. So it would remain relatively confidential for employees that would need to access it. So the bank would be there and accessible for folks that would encounter that. Typically what would be like a family medical leave, whether it be for themselves or a spouse or a child dependent. So the total that somebody could request to use for a situation would be 160 hours per year. So there'd be an application process that would go to the city administrator for consideration of the situation, and then that's when the bank would be utilized. So I don't know, I guess I'll kind of stop rambling for a moment and hear if you guys have any initial questions after some of those initial statements.
Is it just sick leave, or would it also be vacation leave that could be added into this bank?
Right now, we were just proposing that it would be sick leave to be donated. So we didn't extend it to vacation time right now, but.
I think the idea is great. Talk about building teamwork amongst your coworkers too. If people step up and donate days off to help one another out, I think is fantastic. I don't even know why we have to stop at 160. I mean, did Kennedy Graven say there's some reason for that, or whether it's vacation days or sick days? If you wanted to give Josh some days, I don't know why we can't do that, you know?
So I think 160 was just what we saw as some other examples, which would give somebody about a month outside of any leave that they would have had leading up to this. I don't think we're opposed to looking at vacation time. The idea with sick is we have staff that, only utilize sick if they're sick, and it accumulates for some of the staff that have been here for quite some time and not feeling like they're able to use it. So to your point, Sean, I think it would be good for morale that people would feel like
Absolutely.
they're putting it towards something. I don't think I'm opposed to considering something outside of 160, and maybe that would just, of course, be situation-based and outline that in policy.
I mean, I do think having that stopgap of obviously it's not automatic, and so if I have one employee that comes in and asks for 2,080 hours, I'm probably gonna really question what we're doing here, but
Right.
At the same time, I'm not opposed to higher than the 160. I think the 160 number landed because that seemed to be right around where a lot of cities were landing with their own policies, and like a lot of things in city government, you find one city does it and a lot of cities kind of follow suit because nobody wants to reinvent the wheel.
I'm just thinking in the situation of a sick child or somebody that, might need more than a month because a child's going through cancer treatment or something, and the rest of the city staff might want to donate more than that time. So, but no, I love the idea.
I will say to that end, I know we did kind of land on 40 hours because we don't want anyone to run into a situation where they're like, oh shoot, like Sean's wife is out and he needs to be home with the kids. here, have my 200 hours I currently have, and then a month later I find myself in the exact same situation. So
I see.
that 40 hours is an annual thing, and so you can certainly give 40 hours every year to it. But the actual requesting of up to 160, yeah, I mean, I'm certainly open to more if you guys want to go that route.
And our interpretation would be the 160 would be per scenario. So if somebody had that ill child and then unfortunately found themselves ill, or another pertinent person, I think that application could be submitted again, that they needed additional time beyond.
And there
that
could be an instance
160.
where there's 2 employees that need help too.
Right.
So,
Is the bank to a particular individual, or is it a bank universal for everyone?
It'd be a universal bank. Basically, HR and payroll would manage that internal bank of who contributed, what to deduct from the contributors' accounts. And of course, associated pay rates, because we'd have some type of liability on the books that we have that account sitting there, like we do for vacation liability, since we pay out vacation, earned vacation upon termination. But the payout portion would be at that employee's earned wage. So of course, you're gonna have some discrepancy of higher pay and lower pay based on who donated and who's actually receiving. So the receiving individual would receive their regular wage for payout.
I'm more familiar with these when they're individual banks per person. So how does the management of it work when you have 2 people and there's 40 hours in the bank? Who gets to split that? Does Josh have to split the 40 hours depending on the needs of these 2 people and the arguments they present to you, or?
So I mean,
how do you
the
do
way
that?
the way the policy is currently written is I am the one that is basically approving requests. And so, yeah, if there was 40 hours in the bank and 2 people came with requests, then it would be my job to review the requests and either dole them out one way or the other, however those hours would end up.
But you would be able to replenish that bank, right? You could send out an email
Yeah.
to the rest of the city staff saying, hey, we're looking for 5 more days. total
Correct.
or something.
I'm.
Which is what we're trying to avoid by doing this, that folks would do it up front. And from what we've heard from feedback from employees that have come to us to say, is there any way I can support, my teammates, my peers? It would appear that we'd have a fair amount of folks that would want to basically,
And I would say at this point, I would probably not say, hey, Robin's going through a rough time, who wants to donate? I don't know what kind of HIPAA rules you're running into, but we're a small enough city, usually, at this point, we've had nobody actually come to us that needs it and requests it. It's always everyone saying, hey, we know that Jack over here is going through a rough time, what can we do? And so I think that gets out pretty quickly. We also wanted to attempt to avoid any sort of favoritism. Maybe Jill over here has 2 or 3 really close-knit friends, but isn't close to a lot of people, whereas Jack is super popular and everybody likes him. We want to make sure that they have equal access to this bank. If they both need it, basically.
Those are the issues, because I'm more familiar with people that have a kind of a known issue and everyone kind of rallies to it. But you bring up those good points that someone that might not be as well known doesn't have the ability to gather that to it. But I'm not excited for you to have to deal with this, because there's going to be some real issues that potentially you have to wrestle with when you have to separate this out. Well, you get these 5 hours and we only have 10 for you, and you're going to be gone for a longer period of time, and all those kind of things. But I'm aware of people that have had this and done away with it as well. So I'm not sure how we can,
And I mean, I suppose
just to make it known that some of these don't always work.
I suppose like all of our policies, they'll be kind of reviewed on an annual basis. If something's not working, it comes up pretty quickly and we kind of figure stuff out, so.
Is the utility commission aware of this, or Bruce, or?
Bruce was certainly part of our discussions as we were going through all this. And as far as I can tell, I don't think the employees and or Bruce are opposed to it. They're certainly part of the conversation as we were.
There's not 2 banks, there's not
There's not.
utilities,
It
and
would
there's not, okay.
yeah, since the utility commission folds in and is part of the city, there would be a single bank for all employees.
Thanks.
So I believe then we would need to make a motion to approve the addition of the sick leave donation to the personnel policy handbook. I'll make a motion to approve the addition to the personnel policy handbook.
I'll second.
Sean seconds. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, let's go around the room. Steve, do you have anything? No. Matt, anything additional? Chief Applin?
Good. We're good.
He said no.
Robin?
Just an update that we did meet with our auditors. I know Josh had it in the weekly update recently. We're waiting for the final draft of the audit report, and then we'd be sending it to you all in advance prior to the meeting on May 20th. So we're hoping to receive it sometime this week to give ample time for your review, so.
Thank you.
Yep.
Josh?
Yeah, just one thing. So, I believe all 5 of you, that's like 5, we'll pretend Dwayne's there, received an email this last week or within the last week, regarding kind of how the city's handled the removal of trees and emerald ash borer and that sort of thing. So just kind of to give you guys a reminder, I don't know if any of you were K-Check listeners, it was Bake Monday, Mayor Day, and I got to fill in for Dwayne since he wasn't here, and Tom and I talked about it quite extensively for about 10-15 minutes. So kind of, I know there's been concerns about the amount of trees that we've been cutting down in our city parks, and some of that has revolved around the fact, obviously, that emerald ash borer is here, and speaking with Matt, it is ravaging us far faster than we ever could have thought possible. Matt can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe he said almost 3/4 of the trees we've taken out, even those that didn't show signs, once we get them down, we realize they are already infected and we're well on their way. So when we started this whole process, we did discuss about the possibility of potentially saving some select trees. Matt, being our public works director and overseeing our parks and streets division, who doing most of this work, has been over and above trying to figure out kind of the best way to handle this. We started out our process of reaching out to other cities to see how they're handling things. Cities across Minnesota are handling this all very differently. Some cities are doing absolutely nothing and letting trees die where they stand and are leaving them there. Other cities are waiting to remove trees once they are completely dead. Some cities are proactively removing. Some cities are attempting to treat some are attempting to treat all. I know there's been at least one local city that was a big treat city, treating everything that they could possibly could, and after a couple years, they actually stopped treating. They were finding that their treat success rate was about 50%, and so they kind of converted more to the removing sort of situation. Part of our plan has been to apply for grant money, whether it's for treating, removing, or otherwise. Our first grant proposal included removing much of the already damaged stuff that we know exists, and we did get funding for that. I know we recently applied for a grant process that we did not award for, and part of that was selective treating, unlike the first one, and we did not actually get rewarded for that one. Interesting, I know that Ken did quite a bit, looked into the cities that were awarded, and no cities that requested the treating of trees were awarded grants for that last cycle. It was basically, so I don't know, the DNR still allows that as part of a criteria of what you're going to use, but we found it interesting that only those that were removing trees got awarded grants for that. So I think when it really comes down to it, we have not officially gotten bids or quotes for what it would have cost to treat some of those ash trees. We did get informal bids or informal cost estimates from a couple different people, and upwards of $40,000 estimate per year, basically, to try to treat stuff to save as much as possible. And so when it came down to it, we started thinking that playing the long game here, removing the trees and replacing was a far more cost-effective way of dealing with this problem going forward. And yes, it is very, I'm a tree lover myself. I can't remember, I think I've told you, I planted a tulip tree in my front yard because I wanted something unique. And it is still surviving, and probably gonna be another 10 years before I see a tulip on it, but it is there and it's still thriving. But I understand that removing some of these big trees that are 100+ years old, like we may not see the replacements come back anytime in the near future, obviously, and for some people, maybe not in their lifetimes, but trying to play that long game out. I know speaking with Matt, that the density of the trees that we had in Memorial Park, I've actually had people comment surprisingly that they don't live in New Prague and they didn't realize anything was thinner out there than it was before. That being said, I think by opening it up, we may actually see some benefits in that we'll see improved grass underneath, as well as allow the oak trees that are still standing the ability to spread out a little bit more, as trees do when they have space. So I know that some people are very disheartened by the fact that the trees are gone, but it was our attempt at a long play to tackle this going into the future. As I told Tom this morning on K-Check, we not only are we trying to plant 40, 50 trees a year on our own property. This was our second very successful year having a free tree giveaway that is open to any property owner in the city, can get up to 1 free tree a year. And so at this point, while we are still looking potentially for grants that we can help with ash tree removal, we do have that opportunity for people to come and get a tree to replace it. And through that grant, we are able to give out a diverse stock of trees so that hopefully whenever the next bug or disease rolls through, because it will eventually, we are more sheltered the next time. So I guess I certainly stand for any questions, but I know obviously, like I said, when you're removing things that are hundreds of years old, it can be a very sensitive topic for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's sad, but it needs to be done. So it's unfortunate, but it's not of our doing, so.
Thank you for that. Rick, do you have anything?
Nothing.
Bruce, Sean?
I had a couple for Ken, but I can hold off till next council.
And yeah, if you want to shoot me those questions, I can certainly pass.
Not a
them
big
on to
deal,
Ken.
no, just
Okay.
some ordinance things that I can ask him on the 20th. I was gonna find out
You
for
call
some
him,
people.
just, buddy, you gotta leave the band.
No, I would never do that, no. It's not that important. It can
And
wait.
I don't have anything, so with that, I would like to have a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone.
Nice job, Maggie.
Thank you.